Legacy of the Fallen, I like to discuss past meta decks that have fallen from glory. Basically, they were one of the best decks in the game. But this is no longer the case. In this first edition of Legacy of the Fallen, I would like to talk about my favorite deck of all time, Infernity. I will talk about the history of the deck, and also why it is no longer meta in the game today. I will also mention why the deck can be a bit controversial. So Infernities were an archetype used by Kalin, also known as Kiryu in the Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D's anime. All Infernity monsters are dark, and their signature move is the so-called Headless Combo. Most effects of Infernity only work when you have no cards in your hand. The archetype was first introduced with promo cards for the Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D's game, Stardust Accelerator. Those cards were Infernity Archfiend, Dwarf and Guardian. They got a little bit of support here and there, but it really got good when the Shining Darkness came out. The basic game plan of the deck is to get certain Infernity cards, like Necromancer and Archfiend, into the graveyard, and then continuously reviving them with cards like Mirage and Launcher. Every time Infernity Archfiend is special summoned, while you have no cards in your hand, it can search an Infernity card. This is especially brutal when you consider the fact that Infernity Barrier is a card. Infernity Barrier is a counter trap that can be played if you have no cards in your hand and have an Infernity monster in attack position. It negates any monster, spell or trap effect. And that is one huge thing which led to their position as one of the strongest decks ever. Multiple searchable counter traps, when no archetype had access to such a thing. Infernity Barrier was a TCG promo initially. The OCG, the Asian side of Yu-Gi-Oh!, didn't initially have access to Barrier. It took the OCG about a year to get it. Yet the deck still saw a lot of play, as one of the best decks out there. So you can't just fully say the deck was good just because of Infernity Barrier. One interesting trend I found by looking at discussions from 2010 is that people favored to run only 2 barriers or 1 barriers, not 3 copies. Nowadays, that sounds crazy, why not run multiple barriers? But people had very good argument for it. 3 barrier was simply overkill. You never need more than 2 copies. And honestly, this makes sense. The game changed a lot in the last few years, and the playing style was different back then. Although the deck shifted playing styles after a while, it was initially an OTK focused deck. And searchable counter traps aren't needed in an OTK focused deck. It's also fun to look at the reactions of Infernity Barrier being announced. It was initially semi-leaked, and people immediately went into denial mode. No way this card is real, right? A solemn judgment for Infernity? The idea alone sounded ridiculous. One user was very poetic in his comment. This is censored. Disgusting. Konami can suck my censored. I'm flat out refusing to duel Infernity duelists when the format comes. And he wasn't alone. Many people in this thread were upset. Many people wanted to quit. People claimed they outright refused to face Infernity now. The deck will be tier 0. The one positive thing here is that the TCG didn't have access to Trishula. If they did, well, that would probably have been a tier 0 deck. Part of the reason why I think people initially only had a few copies of Barrier is having access to multiple Infernity Launcher. Like, seriously, Infernity Launcher was at 3. The idea alone is crazy. The combination of triple Launcher and multiple Barriers meant the deck was very solid at going first or second, although the focus of the time was playing it as an OTK deck. And when you look at it from that perspective, having multiple launchers, being an OTK deck, Barrier is indeed not a great card to max out on. Yet, unlike what people predicted, the deck never became tier 0. It was definitely strong, but not tier 0 material. The most interesting thing to note is that the deck didn't do as well as people expected. From the deck breakdowns I saw, the deck barely reached tier 1 status. 6 out of 32 decks in one breakdown, for example, were Infernity. There might be multiple reasons for this. The price tag of the deck, as it was really expensive, and I think definitely the difficulty of the deck played a huge role as well, because, you know, Infernity is an easy deck to play. So right now we're looking at an Infernity deck list from before any ban list, and one interesting thing to note is that this list even only runs a single copy of Infernity Barrier. So a few things are interesting here. The deck runs Infernity Beetle. Nowadays you don't really run Beetle, but especially back then it was a really strong tuner monster. If you have no cards in your hand, you can tribute it special up to 2 copies of Infernity Beetle from your deck. And it runs some interesting choices as well. It's definitely spell focused, as you can see here. There are some traps in here, but that's just because they're really strong. And while they didn't have Trishula, Mistworm was still a strong synchro monster, as you can bounce up to 3 cards when you summon it. And something like Bryoneck pre-Errata also was disgusting. I mean, being able to just discard and bounce, especially discarding Infernity wasn't really a cost. And well, as you can just see here, you can already imagine the OTKs just by looking at this, making multiple Mistworms, making cards like Goyo Guardian, Gaia Knight, just summoning big beatsticks while destroying their board and then just pushing for game. Must have been a very obnoxious deck to face. But when the 2010 September ban list dropped, the Infernity deck definitely changed. their ace card, Infernity Launcher, just got limited. But instead of just running the same list as before with just one copy of Infernity Launcher, the playing style changed entirely to a more control-oriented build. People started favoring Avenger over Beetle as their main tuner, and Barrier became a mandatory 3-off. The new win condition wasn't just one-turn killing, it was creating a board that cannot be broken. This also led to a focus on running multiple barriers. Yet the deck started to top even less. So, was this deck as strong as people even made it out to be? I definitely still think so. So let's compare the list from pre-ban list to post-ban list. So once again, one interesting thing to note is that Launcher is now limited, and Barrier is now definitely a 3-off. One interesting thing to note in this decklist as well is the presence of multiple Trapstun. I'm not sure if Trapstun wasn't run before, but this build definitely opted to run it. Stealing Street Patrol was also a new card that gave the deck some additional power. And yeah, as you can see, the deck is just more trap heavy in general. Previously the spell and trap number were basically the same, but now the traps heavily outnumber the amount of spells. So looking at the extra deck, one other thing to note is that it now runs 100 Ice Dragon. So 100 Ice Dragon can basically banish level 6 or lower Dark Effect monster from your graveyard, and it becomes that monster. So in the case of Infernity Mirage, you can banish Infernity Mirage, and then tribute 100 Ice Dragon to summon 2 Infernity monsters from your graveyard. So the basic idea is that you can just reuse the effect of Infernity Mirage, and whenever Infernity Archfiend is summoned, you get to search one Infernity card, most of the time, especially in this variant, Barrier. This allowed the deck to set up disgusting strong boards. And it's a bit akin to the boards I create on my channel. Except I now have link monsters and stuff, of course. But yeah, after this ban list, the deck basically became more obscure, and especially leaving 2011, it just became more and more obscure, you know. We started having mild success at 2011 YCS Providence, piloted by Reinaldo Linus, hope I didn't butcher that name, running 2 Trishula and 3 Barrier. Now, this combination might seem deadly, as OCG didn't really have multiple Trishula and Barrier at the same time. But keep in mind that the OCG also had multiple launchers when they had multiple Trishula. And especially when looking at spamming Trishulas, multiple launchers are stronger than multiple barriers. But then 2014 arrived, and everything changed. The deck came back with a build we now call Exceed Infernity. Many people played this variant, it was definitely popular. And you could argue that this is the peak of the deck. Heading into 2013, many people were playing the deck again. Cards like Shockmaster, Multiple Barrier and Revolver Chain initially gave the deck quite some powerful plays. But Konami messed up when they made Soul Charge a thing, allowing the deck to even take Worlds. And yeah, they did limit Barrier in an attempt to stop them, but 3 Soul Charge for such a deck is just too insane. This era especially had many great Infernity players. One of them has a great deck profile out there that I have watched multiple times that I used to learn the Exceed Infernity, and that pilot is called Corey McDuffie. May he rest in peace. Of course, there's also the winner of the Worlds that year, Sahabi. I'm not gonna try to pronounce that last name as I will definitely butcher it. And well, with the deck winning Worlds, you got a great prize back then. Getting butchered on the ban list. Just ask Blackwing. At the October 2014 ban list, the deck had 2 of their main cards hit. Archfiend got limited, and still is to this day, and Soul Charge got limited that list as well. And now 6 years later, Archfiend is still limited. Is that still needed? I will talk about that point later on. One thing I almost forgot to discuss is the actual Exceed Infinity decklist. So this was the profile that won Worlds, that was piloted by Sahabi. So some interesting things to note is that they had 3 Soul Charge, which is absolutely insane. Like the fact that this card was at 3 is just weird. How did that ever happen, right? How did not preventively just get limited? 3 Upstart Goblin, which also really helped with the speed of the deck, of course. Interestingly, 3 Break, 1 Barrier. Barrier was limited, but they still opted to run 3 Break, which is interesting in my opinion. I guess it gives the deck some power play when going first. Multiple Monk, which is nice. You run a lot of spells, you can just discard those, set up your plays. 1 Armageddon, 2 Dark Greffers. Triple Street Patrol, which also really helped. Dynatarium is a nice tech card, which you can basically just special summon for free. But keep in mind when you do, your opponent can special summon level 4 monster from either player's graveyard, so you need to do it first basically before not too late. Palabyrinth was also an interesting tech choice that some people ran. Double Revolver Chain helped a lot. Leviair was a nice card as well. Lots of strong, powerful cards. One interesting thing to notice is that Mirage is not ran here, which makes sense, it's very bricky. If you can't just get it out like you can nowadays with Sayuja, it makes sense. But all in all, very interesting deck list. It seems very strong. Especially Exciton Knight is something people don't really know nowadays, but especially back then it was quite strong, and Infernity plays with no hand, so they're able to resolve Exciton Knight without any issues. So yeah, very solid, very consistent as well, Infernity variant here, the Exceed build. One interesting thing to note is that the deck initially took another shape in the OCG. Now, this series will mainly focus on the TCG, as getting data on the OCG is hard anyway, but Triple Trish Infernity is interesting. It was just like the TCG strategy, OTK focused, but instead of having a copy or two of Barrier, they had 3 Trishulas. I mean, back then, if you get Trishula multiple times, you just go to the scoop phase. So this is a Triple Trish Infernity decklist, courtesy to Lithium 2300 for featuring the decklist on his channel. So, interesting things to note here is of course the Triple Infernity Launcher, which is just absolutely ridiculous. Triple Trishula, which just rips up your entire board or hand, so going first or going second, making multiple Trishula. It's just too strong. Multiple Inferno, multiple Infernity Inferno to set up the grave. Triple Dark Grapher, which definitely must have helped as well. Multiple Heavy Storm, actually, that's brutal. I didn't know that was a thing. And just in general, a very solid, strong deck list. This seems like a really fun variant to play, but it's not great for the game, not gonna lie. Now, let's jump into a somewhat more controversial topic, Infernity cheaters. Plenty of people have cheated with Infernity, and it was somewhat considered a cheater's deck. And even to this day, it has such a reputation. Personally, I couldn't care less what people think, but this negative stigma can surely affect some people. So, the thing is, Infernity requires you to have an empty hand. Now, this is troublesome. If you open too many monsters, you can't do your combos. Launcher is dead, Archfiend can't search. So some people found an easy solution. Just set your monsters in your spell and trap zones. Oh, your opponent tries to MST you? Just quickly scoop. Unless you have a good reason to believe somebody is cheating, you couldn't just ask a judge to check your back row. Rumors have it that some events ruled that you had to call a judge if you won, and show your back row to them if you played Infernity. But that honestly just seems impractical. I mean, come on, you can't just reserve judges' time to check every single player that plays Infernity just to check if they have cheated. And you also can't just expect an Infernity player to just flip their back row. I mean, they might be running spicy tags. Especially game 1 or game 2, it's not realistic. Yet at the UK Nationals, it apparently was a rule that you had to reveal your back row to your opponent at the end of a duel. However, take this with a grain of salt, it's just hearsay from 10 years ago, but it would have been an interesting ruling if that was truly the case. So, the problem with this way of cheating is that it's not only annoying and powerful, but it's also hard to detect. I mean, what are you gonna do? Just literally check the back row every game? That's unrealistic, right? And it being so hard to detect might have also made it tempting. I mean, it's a competitive game, there are prizes on the stake, so if it can be the difference between winning and losing, you know. And this definitely stains the legacy of the deck a bit, as it is seen by many as a cheater's deck. So, the year is 2020 and the deck is nowhere to be seen. Why is this the case? To start off, there are just multiple issues. One is that people simply gave up on the deck. Personally, it is my personal favorite deck, and in a few years I must have created like 40 builds or something. I never gave up on the decks and tried my best to optimize it, and I created multiple variants like the Danger build when all the Danger is still a 3, or the more recent Triple Axis Infernity build. But not many people try that hard. I know one legend does, Duncan Harbison, but besides him, me and some other people on YouTube, most people have given up on the deck. Then there is the issue of power cards just simply being on the ban list. Trishula is once again limited for no good reason at all, Lavalval Chain is still banned, Archfiend is somehow still limited, which is funny as I would only run a single copy anyway, just a principle thing, like why is it still limited. Infernity Launcher is still at 1, we only got Barrier back to 3 somewhat recently, and Soul Charge is naturally still banned. New support has arrived, but most of the time it's not enough. So Yuja's Skuldrat helps with the summoning of multiple mirages, number 60 Dugaris the Timeless helps with extending, and is somewhat comparable to Lavalval Chain as it also can set up plays, and Void Calamity is basically a spell version of Infernity Inferno. Yet the deck stands no chance, even at locals level. Why? The reason is honestly very simple, the deck is very fragile, both when going first or going second. Going first, there are just too many hand traps in the game that can ruin your day. A single Nibiru can just end your turn, leaving you with no resources on the field and an empty hand. Other hand traps like Droll and Lockbird, which I sadly faced a lot at this year's YCS Utrecht, can also easily stop you in your tracks and end your turn there. Consistency is another issue. Back when it was first relevant, you could set up something mediocre, use Infernity for Inferno, then go all out the next turn. Nowadays, if you don't at least set up a decent board, you just lose the duel. Now, this is mostly fixed by the new 3-axis build me and Frightful Yu-Gi-Oh! Invented when looking back at why flops so hard at the YCS, but the aforementioned issues are still too big. The worst part is that the current state of Infernity, 3-axis variant, is more consistent and strong than any previous Infernity build, setting up like 8 negates with ease and consistency. Basically, the current version of Infernity is full power Infernity. Yet, it still sees no success. And don't even mention going second. No way a deck like Infernity can do that in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! So, will this deck ever return to the spotlight? I definitely don't think so. I don't see Archfiend returning to 3 ever, and I would only run a single copy myself anyway. Launcher at 3 would help, but even that wouldn't be enough, and I doubt Konami will ever release that card from the ban list anyway. And I generally also doubt that Konami is willing to give the support in any shape or form, unless it's accidentally indirectly. So, the deck nowadays is just a cool little casual combo deck. The playing style didn't change much, but the game did, hence it only being casual at best. Yet, despite falling out of the spotlight, I and many others still enjoy the deck. So, this concludes the first episode of Legacy of the Fallen. Anything on Infernity I didn't mention? Any decks you want to see covered next? Tell me so in the comments. With that said, Stardust Yu-Gi-Oh! Signing out.